Well, my next guest joining us was somewhat instrumental in helping us get some of the unique plants here at our studio gardens this year. And I'd like for you to meet Mr. Greg Grant. Hi, Greg. Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening.
Morning.
Greg is the Director of Education and Product Development for Lone Star Growers, a wholesale nursery that's out of San Antonio, Texas. So we've got Greg here in town. And Greg, you can tell, is doing some unique things to some cactus here. Greg, what do you call this, first of all?
It depends whether you like your plants carved on or not. I like to think of it as botanical sculpture. In other words, making yard art or garden art out of your plants. Some people tend to look at it as horticultural graffiti that you're marring the plant. But where I come from in Texas, prickly pear grows all over the countryside, and people try to get rid of it, so it's not something that happens to be a precious item. So if we want to carve on it, it's not that big an issue.
Now, what are you doing? Tell us how you're doing it.
Okay, in this case, you have fleshy pads on a prickly pear, in this case a spineless prickly pear, and you carve it into shapes, or you can cut holes, and it can be faces, it can be shapes, it can be stars, squares, triangles, and then the plant will actually heal over and suberize, so it doesn't hurt the plant. It grows over. If you go through a pasture where the cows have eaten on it, it'll do the exact same thing. In this case, we carve it in a face or a picture that we want. It heals back over, and then you have a semi-permanent piece of art. Now, it will start to grow out of that, so before long this guy will have ears on his head, and you can either carve those pads or let it go, and eventually in time these pads will basically disappear, and you'd never know you carved on it unless you keep carving on it.
Right. Now, you brought a slide with you that we're showing the viewers. Tell us about what they're seeing in the slide.
You can really get carried away and do anything that you want. I generally like to make faces. I'll often get carried away and throw in some shapes and stars and hearts and that sort of thing, but what's fun is to make faces and have each pad be a different face. So there at my home in San Antonio, I have a favorite container of this spineless prickly pear that I like to carve on. You put faces, and then I can also take things like echeverias or ghost plant, and you can put tongues in them with sedums or other succulent plants and have a tongue hanging out there and do anything that you want. And you can put flowers around it as well.
Now, you're calling this a spineless prickly pear. Where does this come from, and is it full sun, I assume, just like most cacti?
Right. A lot of people are familiar with cactus. Well, most cactus that people think of are a plant called prickly pear because it makes an edible fruit somewhat like a pear. If you go to South Texas and Mexico, people talk about pear or tuna, the fruit of a prickly pear cactus. Turns purple and red, and somewhat edible, and you can cook and use it as almost a dessert fruit. But in the wild, they have vicious spines all over the plant. So in this case, it's much easier to take one that's been selected for no spines, although you have to be real careful. You know, somewhere in a glove, even when you touch the spineless forms, and this is the form with the least amount of spines, it has tiny little bitty spines called glochids that'll get in your hand.
What's the genus species of this one, Greg?
All prickly pears belong to the genus Opuntia. In this case, it's a complex hybrid that Luther Burbank did between a number of different species. Okay. So you can pretty much call all spineless prickly pears the genus Opuntia.
Okay.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.